Angela Carter was used to keeping things simple. She liked living in her quiet neighborhood where the grass was always green, and most people just nodded and went on with their lives. Angela liked it that way. She was a private person, even though she had a big job. Most of her neighbors didn't know much about her. To them, she was just the nice black lady who smiled and waved, who sometimes helped the older people with their groceries, and who always kept her own garden neat. What her neighbors didn't know was that Angela was actually a federal investigator. She had worked hard to get to where she was. She'd spent years studying, going through training, and facing difficult situations that made her strong and calm under pressure. Angela never talked about her job, not because she was ashamed, but because it was just safer that way. She liked living a peaceful life away from attention. One sunny afternoon, Angela decided to run some errands. She drove to the grocery store, picked up some fresh vegetables, fruit, and some milk for her morning coffee. It was a simple routine, nothing special. After a long day, she was looking forward to a quiet evening at home. She had a new book waiting for her and a phone call planned with her sister, who lived in another state. As she pulled back into her street, she noticed a police car driving slowly behind her. At first, she didn't think much of it. The police sometimes patrolled the area, especially after there had been a few break-ins last year. But as she parked her car in her driveway, she noticed the police car stop just behind her. The officer inside didn't get out right away. Instead, he watched her, and Angela felt the stare even before she looked up. She got out of her car, locked the doors, and started gathering her grocery bags. That's when the officer stepped out of his car and walked toward her. He was a tall man, wearing dark sunglasses, and his hand was resting on his belt. Angela could feel his eyes on her, cold and sharp. "Excuse me, ma'am," the officer said, his voice sounding too official for such a quiet street. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" Angela looked at him calmly. "I live here," she replied, not showing any sign of nervousness. He frowned. "Can I see some ID? There's been reports of suspicious activity in this area." Angela knew this was strange. She had lived here for years, and no officer had ever stopped her like this before. She set her grocery bags down and reached for her purse. "Of course." "Officer," she said, trying to keep things peaceful. She handed him her driver's license, which clearly showed her address. The officer looked at her ID for a long time, as if searching for something wrong. He glanced at her, then back at the house, and then at her ID again. "Is this your house?" he asked, his tone sharper now. Angela nodded. "Yes, it is. There a problem?" He ignored her question and started looking around the driveway. "Have you seen anyone else in the neighborhood today?" he asked, glancing at the nearby houses. Angela shook her head. "No, just me." "I've been out shopping," he continued to stare at her. "You sure you haven't seen anything out of the ordinary?" Angela felt her patience wearing thin, but she kept her voice gentle. "I really haven't, officer. Just a normal day." Suddenly, he took a step closer, his face growing even more serious. "I need to search your car," he said. "Step aside." Angela felt a jolt of anger rise in her chest, but she stayed calm. "Officer, is there a reason to search my car? I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's voice got louder. "Just step aside, ma'am. I don't want any trouble." Angela stood her ground. She remembered her training: always remain calm, always stay polite, but never let anyone cross the line without a good reason. "Sir, I'm happy to answer your questions, but I'd like to know why you want to search my car. Is there something specific you're looking for?" He didn't like that. He took off his sunglasses and glared at her. "Have something to hide," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. Angela felt a sting at those words, but she didn't react. She knew what he meant by "you people," but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. "Officer, I'd like to know your name and badge number, please," she said, her voice steady. He seemed surprised by her request. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Officer Mitchell. Badge number 4271. Angela nodded, repeating it in her mind. "Thank you, Officer Mitchell. Ken, is there a reason you need to search my car?" Instead of answering, he stepped closer and reached for her arm. "I need you to step aside right now," he said, his grip tightening. Angela's instincts kicked in. She was trained for situations like this, not just for her own safety, but to make sure things didn't get out of control. She looked him in the eye. "Officer, please don't touch me. I haven't done anything wrong." He didn't let go. In fact, he seemed to get angrier. "You're making this harder on yourself," he growled. Angela took a deep breath. She could feel her heart beating faster, but her face stayed calm. She glanced at her security camera above the garage. Everything was being recorded. "Officer Mitchell, please let go of my arm," she said, one more time, but he didn't listen. He tried to pull her toward his car as if he was going to arrest her right there in front of her own house. That's when Angela made her decision. She didn't want to hurt him, but she couldn't let him treat her like a criminal in her own home. Using the moves she had learned over years of training, she twisted out of his grip and stepped behind him. Before he could react, she gently but firmly took hold of his wrist, moved his arm behind his back, and led him toward her garage. She was strong, and quick years of practice had taught her how to handle someone larger than herself. He struggled, but Angela spoke calmly. "I'm not going to hurt you, officer. I just need you to calm down." Once inside the garage, Angela found some zip ties she kept in a drawer for emergencies. She used them to secure his hands knot. Too tight, just enough so he couldn't lash out. She made sure he was sitting safely on a chair and checked to make sure he was okay. Officer Mitchell was furious. "You're going to regret this," he yelled. "You have no idea who I am." Angela didn't answer. Instead, she called the emergency line she had memorized for situations like this. Her agency's number? She explained the situation quickly and clearly, asking for backup and legal support. She knew she was doing everything by the book. She hung up the phone. She heard Officer Mitchell still shouting. He said things she had heard before, accusations, threats, and words meant to hurt. But Angela didn't let it get to her. She stood in her own garage, steady and calm, waiting for the truth to come out. And that was how an ordinary day turned into something Angela would never forget, a day that would change not only her own life, but the lives of many others in her quiet neighborhood. Angela stood in her garage, breathing deeply to keep herself steady. She glanced at Officer Mitchell, who was now sitting on a chair, his wrists secured with zip ties. She didn't want to embarrass him, but she also couldn't let him act out of control, especially not in her own home. It was strange to see a police officer in such a position, but Angela knew. She'd followed the law and used the training she'd worked so hard for. The garage felt quiet and tense. The only sound was the hum of the freezer and Officer Mitchell's heavy breathing. He stared at Angela with anger and even a little fear, but she refused to meet his glare. She was focused on what needed to happen next. Angela picked up her phone again and double-checked that her agency's emergency team was on the way. She spoke calmly into the phone, giving clear instructions and making sure they knew exactly what had happened. She also reminded herself to stay calm. She knew that when the other officers arrived, she would need to show them that she had acted responsibly. Officer Mitchell, however, didn't seem interested in calming down. "You're in a lot of trouble." "Lady," he spat, his words sharp and cold. "You think you can just tie up a cop? I'll see you behind bars for this. I'll have your job, your house, everything." Angela looked at him, her face soft but her voice firm. "Officer, I didn't want this. You tried to arrest me for no reason. You had no cause to search my car or put your hands on me. I just want you to stay calm until help arrives." He shook his head. "Don't try to act like you're in charge here," he said, but his voice sounded less certain now. "People like you always try to play the victim." Angela heard those words and felt a wave of sadness. She had spent her life working to make the world safer for everyone, and yet here she was, being accused and insulted in her own garage. But she remembered her training and stayed quiet, knowing there was nothing she could say. Right now, to change his mind, she decided to check on him to make sure he was comfortable and not hurt. "Are the zip ties too tight?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "I don't want you to be in pain." He jerked his arms away. "Just leave me alone," he snapped, but Angela could see the confusion and embarrassment in his eyes. He wasn't used to feeling powerless. Angela checked her security cameras using her phone. The whole incident had been recorded. Her arrival, the confrontation, the struggle, and how she had handled everything, step by step. She knew this would help her if there were any questions later. A few minutes passed, and the tension in the garage grew. Officer Mitchell shifted in his seat and glared at the walls, his anger bubbling just beneath the surface. He tried to twist out of the zip ties, but Angela had made sure they were snug enough to keep him safe, not enough to hurt him. He kept talking, trying to regain control. "You'll be sorry. I have friends on the force. They won't let this go." Angela shook her head gently. "All I want is for this to end safely," she said. "You're not my enemy. But you need to understand, you can't treat people this way just because you wear a badge." He stopped talking for a moment, surprised by her calmness. Angela could see him thinking, maybe even wondering how she had managed to turn the tables so quickly. She had no desire to punish him, only to make sure he didn't hurt anyone, including himself. Suddenly, there was the sound of a car pulling up outside. Angela peeked through the window and saw a dark sedan park at the curb. 2 plainclothes agents stepped out, wearing badges on their belts. They approached the house quietly and professionally. Angela went to the garage door and opened. "I'm here," she called softly. The agents entered, their eyes scanning the scene. One of them, a tall woman with a calm voice, nodded at Angela. Nebel quotes, "Ms. Carter, are you all right?" the agent asked, looking first at Angela, then at the officer on the chair. Angela nodded. "I'm fine. This is Officer Mitchell. He attempted to detain me at my home without cause and tried to use force. I used my training to restrain him safely. I have the security footage." The agent nodded again. "Good work," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "We'll take it from here." Officer Mitchell looked from Angela to the agents, his anger turning to confusion. "Who are you people?" he demanded. "You can't just walk into my investigation." Of the agents stepped forward and spoke with authority. "Sure, you need to calm down. You're being detained for your own safety while we investigate what happened here." He tried to argue, but the agents didn't give him a chance. They checked the zip ties, made sure he wasn't hurt, and then asked Angela to tell her side of the story again. Angela explained everything clearly, leaving out nothing. Just as she would in any official report, as Angela spoke, Officer Mitchell grew more and more uneasy. He seemed to realize that these were not ordinary police officers. Their questions were direct and professional. They treated Angela with the kind of respect that surprised him. Angela provided the agents with her phone, showing the security camera footage. They watched quietly, nodding as the events played. Out on screen, the officer's aggressive questions, the unnecessary attempt to search her car, and the way he grabbed her arm. Everything was clear. The agents made notes and thanked Angela for her cooperation. One of them called the local police station to inform them that an internal investigation would follow as the agents worked. Angela's neighbors began to notice the scene. A few people peered from behind curtains, whispering about the police cars and the mysterious black sedan outside Angela's house. Angela felt embarrassed by the attention, but knew she had done what was necessary. Officer Mitchell's face changed. As the minutes passed, he no longer looked angry. Instead, he looked uncertain, like someone who had suddenly realized he was in trouble. He stopped shouting and sat quietly, staring at the floor. One of the agents gently removed the zip ties and asked him to stand. "We're going to talk at the station," she said. "You'll have a chance to tell your side." Angela stood near the doorway, feeling relief mixed with sadness. She wished the day had gone differently, but she knew this was important. She hoped that something good would come out of it, not just for herself, but for everyone in the community. After the agents left with Officer Mitchell, Angela went inside her house and sat down. She was tired, but she felt proud for standing her ground. She sent a quick message to her sister, letting her know everything was okay. Then she sat in her favorite chair, thinking about everything that had just happened. She wondered if Officer Mitchell would change or if he would learn something from what had happened. More than anything, Angela hoped her actions would show others that staying calm, using your training and doing what's right can make a difference even when the world feels unfair. And so, as the sun set outside, Angela waited for the next Chapter 2 begin. Not knowing what the future would hold, but knowing she had done the right thing. Angela sat alone in her living room, the house finally quiet after all the commotion. She stared at her phone for a while, replaying the security footage just to be sure that everything had happened the way she remembered. It was all there clear. And true, she sighed deeply, thinking about how fast an ordinary day could change into something so complicated. A little while later, there was a knock at her door. Angela felt a rush of nerves but stood up straight and opened it. Colleagues from the federal agency were standing there, both dressed in plain clothes, but with official badges clipped to their belts. The taller one, Agent Riley, gave her a warm smile. "Angela, are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yes, I'm okay. Just never expected anything like this to happen right in front of my own home." The other agent, Ms. Thomas, stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "You did everything right," she said. "You kept calm, you followed the law, and you protected yourself. It's time to make sure the truth comes out." Angela led them to the kitchen table, where she had already set out her phone and written down the main details of what had happened. The agents listened closely as Angela explained, step by step, how Officer Mitchell had followed her, questioned her for no reason, and tried to search her car. She told them how he ignored her requests, grabbed her arm, and tried to force her to his car. She described how she used her training to protect herself and keep him from hurting anyone. Agent Riley nodded as he took notes. "You're a professional, Angela. You did more than most people could do in that situation." Angela smiled a little, feeling comforted by his words. "I just wanted to be safe and to make sure nobody got hurt." They turned their attention to the security footage next. Angela showed them the video from her garage camera and her driveway camera. Every detail was clear. The agents paused the video at key moments, now making notes and taking screenshots for their report. As they finished reviewing the footage, there was another knock at the door. This time, 2 local police officers stood on the porch along with a police supervisor. Their faces were serious, but not angry. They asked if they could come in and speak with her. Angela nodded and welcomed them. The agent stood beside her as the officers introduced themselves and asked her to explain what had happened from her point of view. Angela calmly repeated her story, just as she had for the agents. She showed them the footage and answered all their questions. The supervisor, Captain Evans, watched the videos carefully and listened closely to Angela. He turned to his officers and said quietly, "We'll need to file a full report and start an internal review right away. This is serious." One of the officers, Officer Daniels, looked at Angela with a mixture of respect and surprise. "Sorry you had to go through this, ma'am," he said quietly. "This isn't how we want our community to feel." Angela nodded. "I understand. I just hope things can get better for everyone." The police finished their questions and left. But before they did, Captain Evans shook Angela's hand. "Thank you for keeping your head and for documenting everything. You did the right thing." As night fell, Angela finally sat down and let herself relax for a moment. Her phone buzzed with messages from her sister and a few close friends, asking if she was safe. She replied that she was fine, but she didn't tell them the whole story. She wasn't ready for that yet. Meanwhile, the police station, Officer Mitchell was having a very different evening. He sat in a small, quiet room while an internal affairs officer asked him questions. At first, Mitchell tried to defend himself, saying he was just doing his job and that Angela had attacked him for no reason. But as the questions got more detailed and the evidence was presented, his story started to fall apart. The internal affairs officer explained that there were serious consequences for his actions, especially since there was video proof and witnesses. From a federal agency, his face grew pale as he realized how much trouble he was in. He never expected things to go this way. The news of the incident spread quickly among the officers at the station. Some of them shook their heads in disbelief, while others looked troubled. They all knew Mitchell had a reputation for being quick to judge, but none of them expected something like this. Back at Angela's house, the federal agents prepared their official report. They praised Angela for her clear thinking and her calm, respectful handling of a difficult situation. "You did your job, and you stood up for yourself," Ms. Thomas said, giving Angela a gentle pat on the shoulder. That's not easy. Angela felt a deep sense of relief and pride, but also sadness. She wished things had been different. She thought of all the people who might not have been able to stand up for themselves, the way she had people who didn't have her training or her support. She hoped that by sharing her story, something might change. Late that night, after her colleagues left, Angela sat outside on her porch and looked up at the stars. The neighborhood was quiet again, but she knew her life might never be the same. She wondered what people would say when they heard what happened, and if her neighbors would look at her differently. She also wondered what would happen to Officer Mitchell. She remembered the moment when she told him who she really was, a federal investigator with the power and responsibility to stand up for justice. At the time, his face had changed completely. The anger left his eyes, replaced by shock and fear. He realized then that he hadn't just picked the wrong person, he had picked the wrong fight altogether. Angela thought about the responsibility that came with her job. She wasn't just protecting herself, she was helping protect her whole community. She hoped the investigation would be fair, and that Officer Mitchell would be given a chance to explain himself, but also to learn from his mistakes. The next morning, Angela woke up to dozens of messages. News of the incident had started to spread. On social media, though, many details were still private. People in the neighborhood were already talking, and some local reporters wanted to ask questions. Angela decided to stay quiet for now, letting the official process play out. At the police station, things were moving quickly. Officer Mitchell was placed on administrative leave while the investigation continued. Internal Affairs reviewed all the security footage, the police body camera, which had turned on just before he entered the garage, and the reports from the federal agents. Some officers were angry, thinking Mitchell had been treated unfairly. Others were relieved, knowing that change was needed. There were quiet conversations about how to handle situations with respect, how to avoid letting personal bias get in the way, and how important it was to listen and stay calm. Angela, for her part, stayed focused on her work. She checked in with her agency, answered more questions, and made sure all her paperwork was in order. She also checked on her neighbors, wanting them to know she was still the same person, still friendly, still willing to help, still hoping for a peaceful community. Through it all, Angela never lost her sense of purpose. She knew what she had done was right, and she hoped that, in some small way, her actions would help bring about change, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved to feel safe and respected in their own homes. In the days that followed the incident, Angela's house became quieter, but the world around her was full of whispers. News of what had happened started to spread, first in her own neighborhood, then across the city. People talked about the woman who stood up to a police officer in her own driveway. Some people knew Angela was involved, but they didn't know the whole story. Others made guesses and shared rumors, but Angela did not want to add to the noise. She believed that it was best to wait for the truth to come out, step by step, in the proper way. Angela kept busy with her work. As a federal investigator, she was used to dealing with complicated cases, but this time, she was at the center of the story. Every day she checked in with her agency, answered follow-up questions, and sent updates to her supervisor. She made sure her security footage was backed up and her written statement was clear. Angela's supervisors thanked her for her honesty, her calm thinking, and her respect for the law, even under pressure. Meanwhile, the local police department was dealing with its own challenges. The department announced an official investigation into Officer Mitchell's actions. An internal affairs team was brought in to look at all the fax security camera footage, witness statements, body cam recordings, and even Mitchell's past record. The team found several complaints in Officer Mitchell's file from people in other neighborhoods who said he had acted unfairly. Many people had not come forward before, but now, with Angela's case in the news, they felt safe to speak. Some police officers felt nervous. They worried about what this would mean for their department and for their own work. Others felt hopeful, thinking that maybe now things could change for the better. The police chief, Chief Rogers, spoke to his team at a meeting. He said, "We have to look at what happened and learn from it. Our job is to protect and serve everyone in this community, and we have to do it the right way. The community had many opinions. Some neighbors were shocked that something like this could happen. On their own street, they remembered Angela as kind and thoughtful and couldn't believe anyone would treat her unfairly. Others wanted to know more, asking for details and answers. Local reporters called the police station and knocked on Angela's door, but she always replied politely, "No comment at this time. I trust the investigation process." Angela's agency offered her support, made sure she had counseling if she needed it, and they protected her privacy as much as possible. Angela also received private messages from people she didn't even know, some thanking her for her courage, others sharing their own stories of being treated unfairly. Angela answered as many as she could, offering hope and reminding them to stay strong and trust the process. One afternoon, Angela was called to a meeting at her agency's office downtown. She sat with her supervisor and two lawyers who specialized in civil rights cases. They told her, "Angela, your case is now part of a larger review. We're looking at police training and how to improve it. You did everything by the book, and you showed us how important it is for law enforcement to be fair and respectful." Angela nodded, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility. She knew this was bigger than just her own story. It was about making things better for everyone. At the same time, Officer Mitchell was facing tough questions. He was called to meetings with internal affairs, where he had to explain his actions, step by step. At first, he tried to defend himself, saying he was just doing his job. But when he saw the video footage and heard Angela's clear explanation, he began to realize he had made a mistake. Mitchell's friends on the force visited him at home. Some tried to comfort him, saying it's a tough job, things happen. Others told him honestly, "You can't treat people like that. Things have to change." While the investigation continued, the police department held special meetings for all officers. They talked about racial bias, respect, and how to handle tough situations without letting anger or fear take over. Officers watched training videos and listened to speakers who had been through similar situations. Some officers felt defensive, but others listened carefully, wanting to do better in the future. The community also held a meeting at the local school auditorium. People gathered to talk about what had happened and what needed to change. Some shared stories of times they felt scared or disrespected by police. Others talked about the good officers who helped them feel safe. Angela attended quietly, sitting in the back, just listening. She didn't want to be the center of attention, but she wanted to support her neighbors and learn from their experiences. At the end of the meeting, the community leader thanked Angela by name. Angela Carter showed courage and respect, even when things were unfair. We can all learn from her example. People clapped, and Angela felt a warmth in her heart, even though she was still a little shy about all the attention as the investigation reached its final stages. The police chief held a press conference. Chief Rogers announced, "Our department is making changes. We're updating our training to include more lessons on fairness, respect, and understanding. We are here to serve everyone, and we will do better." He also confirmed that Officer Mitchell was suspended while they finished the review. "We take these matters seriously, and we're committed to doing the right thing," the chief said. Angela watched the press conference on TV, sitting in her living room with her cup of tea. She thought about everything that had happened in such a short time. She felt proud that her actions had helped bring about change, but she also knew there was still a long way to go. She hoped that the new training would help police officers treat everyone with kindness and respect. No matter who they were, Angela's friends and neighbors started to see her differently, not just as the quiet, helpful woman next door, but as someone who stood up for what was right. Some sent her flowers. Others stopped by with home-cooked meals, and children drew her pictures saying, "Thank you, Miss Carter." Angela hung the drawings on her refrigerator and smiled. She was still the same person she had always been, but now people knew her story. She hoped that would inspire others to speak up when things weren't right, to stay calm under pressure, and to believe that even one person could help make a difference. As the sun set on another day, Angela took a walk in her neighborhood. People waved and smiled at her. She knew there might still be hard days ahead, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had her community, her agency, and her own sense of what was right. That was enough to keep her moving forward, one step at a time. Angela woke early the next morning, sunlight spilling across her bedroom floor. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint chirping of birds outside. The world felt calm again, but she knew nothing would ever be quite the same. Over the last few days, she had become a quiet symbol of fairness and strength in her community. It was a role she hadn't asked for, yet she accepted it with humility and determination. She slipped on her running shoes and stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh, and as she ran down the sidewalk, she waved to neighbors who called good morning. A few of them paused on their porches to offer a small nod or a thumbs up. Their support warmed her heart, reminding her that standing up for what was right could inspire others. She thought of the children's drawings on her fridge and smiled. They weren't just pictures, they were promises. Little reminders that kindness and courage mattered. When she returned home, she found an email from her supervisor asking her to come into the office later that day. The subject line simply read, "Next steps." Angela brewed a cup of coffee and sat at her kitchen table, swirling the dark liquid around her mug. She allowed herself a quiet moment to reflect. The federal report had praised her clarity, her calm approach, and her choice to follow every legal guideline. She felt proud, but also aware that the work was not over. By mid-morning, she arrived at the federal building. The lobby was bright, with tall windows and polished floors. Angela greeted the security officer, who smiled warmly and waved her through. She rode the elevator up to her office floor, thinking about how her life had shifted from private to very public in just a few days. She entered her supervisor's office, where Agent Riley and Ms. Thomas were waiting. "Good morning, Agent," Riley said, offering her a bottle of water. "Thank you for coming in so quickly." Angela took the water. "Of course, you said this was about next steps." Ms. Thomas nodded. "Yes, we've seen the initial media coverage, and there's more coming. I want to support you. And also, use this moment to make a lasting difference. We'd like to create a training session for other investigators and officers, using your experience as an example." Angela felt a mix of pride and nervousness. "You want me to speak about what happened?" Agent Riley smiled. "Only if you're comfortable. We'll help you prepare. Your story can teach others how to stay calm under pressure, how to follow the law, and how to protect themselves and others without escalating a situation." Angela thought of the fear she'd felt when Officer Mitchell first confronted her. She remembered her own training guiding, her hands as she secured the zip ties, and how her calm voice had soothed a tense room full of strangers. She understood, more than ever, that training and preparation saved lives. "I'd be honored to help," she said. "If it can keep someone else safe, it's worth it." They spent the next hour discussing details, setting dates, and planning a small seminar. Angela would share her perspective, and her agency would extend invitations to local law enforcement groups. She felt a sense of purpose growing inside her. This was more than justice for herself. It was a chance to shape how people treated one another. After the meeting, Angela stepped outside into the bright afternoon. She took a deep breath and decided to take a walk in the park nearby. As she strolled among the green trees and blooming flowers, she thought about Officer Mitchell. She didn't wish him harm. She hoped the investigation would guide him toward self-reflection and growth. She believed people could change when they saw honest examples of respect and courage. The next week brought more news coverage. Some stories highlighted Angela's calm strength. Others focused on the idea that no one, not even a police officer, could abuse their power. She watched interviews where experts discussed racial bias and the importance of respectful policing. She remained mostly silent, allowing the professionals in her agency to speak on her behalf. Occasionally, she provided a short statement. "I believe in justice for all. I believe in fairness and respect." That is how we build trust. Back at the police department, the internal affairs report was complete. Officer Mitchell faced disciplinary action. He received a formal reprimand and was required to attend bias training, conflict resolution workshops, and counseling sessions. He would keep his job for now, but his reputation had suffered. More importantly, The department had agreed to review its training policies and include regular community dialogues, so officers could hear directly from residents about their experiences and concerns. Angela heard about those changes through mutual contacts, good news that made her hopeful. She knew it would take time for distrust to fade and for real relationships to build. But she had faith that small steps could lead to meaningful progress. One afternoon, she received a letter in her mailbox. It was handwritten on thick cardstock, signed by Chief Rogers of the local police. In it, he thanked her for her courage and professionalism, and he invited her to speak at a future community police forum. Angela felt moved by the gesture. It was an invitation to collaborate, to bridge divides that sometimes felt too wide to cross. When she spoke at that forum a few weeks later, the auditorium was full. Officers sat beside residents, school teachers sat beside social workers, and community leaders sat beside faith leaders. Angela stood at the front, her heart fluttering with a familiar mix of excitement and nerves. She began to speak in her simple, clear way, sharing the story of that day, the choices she made, and the lessons she learned. She spoke about how she remained calm, how she asked for badge numbers, how she used only enough force to keep everyone safe, and how she documented every step. She emphasized respect and communication, saying, "We all deserve dignity. When we remember that, we can solve problems together." The audience was silent, listening closely. When she finished, it was a moment of stillness, then applause. Some people stood, cheering. Angela felt a warmth in her chest, gratitude for the chance to make a difference, and humility for the trust people were placing in her life. Settled back into a peaceful rhythm after that. Angela returned to her quiet neighborhood, her routine, errands, and her love of gardening. She was different now, too. She carried a quiet confidence, knowing that her actions had sparked something important. She still waved at her neighbors, still helped with groceries, and still kept her garden neat. Yet behind that friendly smile was a woman who had stood up for fairness and shown others how to do the same. One evening, as she watered her flowers under the soft glow of her porch light, a young girl from down the street wandered over. She held a drawing in her hand, a picture of Angela bravely tying up Officer Mitchell with a big sun shining overhead. "I drew this for you," the girl said shyly. Angela knelt and accepted the picture. She admired the bright colors, the hopeful face she had drawn. "Thank you so much," she said. "This means a lot to me." The girl smiled, then ran back home. Angela placed the drawing near her kitchen window, a reminder of how even one person's actions can ripple through a whole community. That night, Angela wrote in her journal, "Today I saw hope in a child's drawing. Today I felt the future grow a little brighter. I will continue to stand up for justice, to speak when I must, and to listen when I can. For in every act of respect we plant a seed of change." And as she closed her journal and turned off the light, she knew she would always carry that day in. Her garage is a turning point, not as a moment of conflict, but as a moment of truth, courage, and quiet power. In her heart, she believed that kindness and fairness would guide the way forward, one gentle step at a time.